Hey guys, how's it going? It is your boy, Manga Andrew, and I'm here just to do my discussion for My Hero Academia manga chapter 372. And yeah, for the most part, what we're going to be talking about in this chapter is pretty much what's going to be going on within the next few chapters based off what we got in this chapter, and also dive into a few more things that I really didn't dive into as much in the actual review, particularly when it comes to the symbolism of the gun in this chapter and what the story is trying to say about the racism plotline and how most likely than not it's going to be resolved. But first, let's go into some changes that we had between the official and unofficial translations, because there is not that many in this chapter, but there is one thing that was changed that I really did enjoy. And it primarily comes from the speech that Yamada has about Shoji and Koda in reference to how they are significantly stronger as kids now than both Aizawa as well as Shirokumo and Yamada himself were when they were kids. But in the official translation, they add the extra line of referring to them as kids, no, as young men. And I really like this change because it kind of emphasizes a key theme or a key idea that we've been seeing in this war. And that's pretty much the idea that even though the students of Class 1A are by all definitions kids, they are not being treated as kids. They are being treated as full-blown adults, or should I be more specific, full-blown heroes. That's why the entire time, very few characters actually call the students by their actual given name. Because when you are a hero, you should be called by your hero name. And we've seen that from many different characters, such as with Ajiro and Tokoyami with Hawks trying to call Tokoyami Tsukuyomi his hero name. The same can be said about characters like Mirio taking upon his hero name, as well as characters such as like Deku and Bakugo when they're being called Deku and Dynamite by other pro heroes. So this just ties more into something that the story is saying, is that even though they are kids, they are full-blown heroes, and emphasizing that idea by the fact that because they are from a younger generation, they are in theory stronger than the adults were at the same age. And we see that in this chapter with literally Shoji sending a giant spinner flying, as well as getting to see Koda's power up with his horns and being able to communicate with the birds. And something else that is a small change is just the names of their attacks, where we do have Kota's name being the exact same attack between the different translations, but how Shoji's is just a slight difference when it comes to Octo Expansion, where in the official translation, it's just Octo Expansion, taking out the EX. And something else that I actually missed in the scene is that Koda isn't just controlling the birds, but you can also see wasp as well as like different dragonflies and other insects in there, which is very cool because it once again shows that Koda as a character has not necessarily outgrown his fear of bugs, but has at least grown to a point where he is no longer deadly afraid of using bugs in his actual arsenal of attacks. So yeah, those were the small changes that we really had in this chapter, so let's get more into what I really wanted to discuss in this chapter, and it's pretty much how the story is setting up the solution for the racism, the discrimination in the world of My Hero Academia, as well as the implications of the one panel with the gun. And when it comes to the gun and the situation that they are in, there are some many implications when it comes to this gun, and the fact that 2 gunshots ring in this chapter. One issue people may have with this is that you have a police officer aiming at a mutant, or a police officer aiming at a group of underrepresented and discriminated against minorities. And the implication of that in our real world is very palpable with the idea that many police officers have abused their powers and have, under very, very, very unjustifiable means, highly attack those of a minority group more with weapons than those who are of a white or Caucasian descent, by significant margins and ratios as seen in our real world. Many people may think of this as being tone deaf by having a police officer firing on a minority group. Now, there are some differences between the real world and what's happening in My Hero Academia. For instance, in the real world, most police officers, realistically speaking, are not bad people. However, there may be issues with the training, how they are being raised when it comes to societal racism and discrimination may be playing an issue in why this is happening in our real world. and how this concept is seen and how this idea is seen not just in the smaller areas but also in the bigger cities. In the world of My Hero Academia, as we have been told, this type of idea and the problems with their society is more centered towards the fringes of society, or specifically to the outer areas or the less developed areas or more of the rural areas of Japan. So there's also that slight difference in that the racism in the world of My Hero Academia is not a necessarily one for our real world. Also with the idea that these individuals do have distinctive differences that set them apart from humans besides just skin color. And then there's also this idea that they may be individuals who are rioters or are radicalized, but the difference is that in this situation, it's not unfounded for them to be firing out on the crowd of people that are actively attacking and attempting to kill them. Because generally speaking, in our real world, the reasoning why the shooting of unarmed black men are unjustified is the fact that most likely than not, they are in situations where they would be considered non-threatening, they will not have any type of weapons upon them, and that there should be no reason for the police officer to actually be firing on them in those situations. However, in the situation that they are in right now, the implication that is that they are in a war-based setting where they are literally enemies fighting against each other, and that the justification is that because they are in this warlike setting, that death would be inevitable. And the fact of the matter is that these individuals, even though they are rioters, have attempted murder on multiple occasions, not just on the heroes, but also on the police officers. In the situation, logically speaking, it does make sense that as these riot shields are being ineffective and they are literally being attacked to the point of being killed, that a police officer would take this as an actual threat upon their lives and shoot at the crowd of rioters and potentially killing one of these mutants. Even with this form of justification, I do think that this is not going to be something that is going to be settled easily or lightly, or is going to be something that Horikoshi is going to do perfectly, but I do think that there is some setup for it to be done well. And it's mainly due to the fact that we do not see who or what gets hit with those bullets. And many may assume that it may be the rioters, or that the people that may have taken the bullets are the rioters, the heteromorphs, the mutants in the crowd. But I think that a possibility of what is happening is that he shoots the gun and that someone either shoots it up in the air, moves the individual's hand into the air so that no one gets hit, or if someone does get hit and shot, it's actually a police officer. And that what happens is that they may have purposely gotten in the way of the bullets to protect the people, or to protect the rioters, or to protect the heteromorph and mutant-based people, that he may come to a realization that we shouldn't be using violence to this extent because most of the people in the crowd are not necessarily like violent villains or even criminals, but they are just people that are being tricked and misled into attacking a hospital. And that this may set up even more of the people in the crowd to actually begin to realize that they are in the wrong by attacking a hospital, and eventually mitigating the numbers from 15,000 to being a very small significant portion that will most likely still not change their mind, that they are going to be the ones that actually won't change, and that they may be the ones that would have to be put in jail. So I think that when it comes to this, there's some implications that you can make with this, and I think that we cannot really place judgment on what's going to be happening with this scene and with this panel until the later chapters come out. Also, something that I forgot to bring up is that My Hero Academia is going to be on break for 2 weeks, so we're not going to get the implications of this entire chapter and this entire scene on the story until possibly within the next 2 weeks. And speaking of those implications, let's talk about the implication at the end of this chapter. Because most likely what I'm predicting is going to happen, and I've said this before, is I do think that when it comes to what's going to be happening with Kurogiri, I think that he is going to awaken by the voices of Spinner and Yamada, but what's going to be happening is that as Spinner tries to play the voice of All for One or Tomura, Yamada is going to break through the Shirokumo that is inside, and that this is going to lead to this individual not warping Tomura Shigaraki into this individual or into this hospital, but will warp Aizawa here. Because we do know that when it comes to Warp Gate, it has to have specific coordinates, but also has to share a connection with the people that is warping there as well. And potentially who is in control, Kurogiri or Shirokumo, will decide on who will be sent to Central Hospital. And if it is Shigaraki, the heroes are more or less doomed because there's going to be no way any of the individuals here will prevent Shigaraki from attaining Kurogiri and abusing his power to win this war. But if it is Aizawa brought here by Shirakumo, that will be even more interesting, because not only would it mean that Shigaraki will not have the ability to change the tide of the war, but if Shirakumo actually breaks out, then this will be still detrimental for the heroes, but not as much. And how if Shirakumo brings Aizawa to this location, then the people here will not be in trouble. But this would mean that Shigaraki will eventually be free to use all of his quirks without any restrictions in the coffin, because Monoma's quirk will not be able to use Aizawa's quirk for more than 5 minutes. And this ties into the reason why I said that Deku has to defeat Shigaraki in 5 minutes, because once that 5 minutes is up, Shigaraki is going to have full control of his quirks, and it's going to be an even more difficult battle for Deku, because not only will he be in danger, One For All will be in danger, as well as everyone inside of that coffin could potentially die if Shigaraki uses decay, which we know will not be as effective because of how the coffin is built up, and it is built in mind for Shigaraki's decay, but it will still be extremely dangerous and potentially put the entire coffin at risk if his quirks are unmanaged. So yeah, I think this part of the chapter is really setting up that someone is going to be transferred over to Central Hospital, and I think that most likely Shirakumo is going to awaken and bring Aizawa to this hospital, which would kind of be the way that Kurogiri will be able to change the tide of the war in the villain's favor. As well as it gets to finally wrap up the flashback and the backstory and the character development and growth for these characters of the Idiot Trio, as they will finally most likely be reunited. And I don't think Shirakumo will completely come back into the story at this moment, but that this is going to be hopefully them influencing Shirakumo to probably bring Aizawa back to that location later on, or that he has to stay here and fight against Spinner, and that this is going to be a stopgap, and that maybe this will be the last moment that Kurogiri or Shirakumo could actually use their abilities before they are dead or before something bad happens to them. Also, something that I almost forgot to bring up is the fact of how are they going to be solving the racism aspect of My Hero Academia. And I think that it's fairly simple and straightforward, and it's pretty much the idea that what the racism and discrimination in the world of My Hero Academia is supposed to be done with is not only just changing society, but changing how people interact with people in the society. Which pretty much is the idea that what's going to more or less not necessarily end racism or discrimination in the world of My Hero Academia, but significantly put it on the back burner and mitigate it by a lot, is just having people stand up for the heteromorphs when they are being abused or discriminated against. Because the story is saying that because of how the world is set up and how society is set up, is that the idea of discrimination and racism against heteromorphs is pretty much eradicated in the bigger city area. However, in the more rural areas, that is not necessarily the case. So I think what the story is setting up is the idea that what's going to be happening is that you're just going to have people stand up for heteromorphs when they are being abused and discriminated against, and not just sweep it under the rug, acknowledge that it's a problem, and then try to actively solve it. Because the issue with hero society and discrimination and racism as it is that these individuals were left behind. People most likely did not know the full extent of where these people or how poorly they were treated, but now that is going to be coming to the forefront, and that we're going to be seeing more people taking active action to try and help these heteromorphs and defend them. Which is why in this chapter, we saw what Koda's father did to protect Koda's mother. He stood up for her. He criticized the people that were going against her. And I think that's what Horikoshi is planning, that we're going to be having people standing up for the heteromorphs and making sure that they are protected. Basically tying into the idea that everyone is going to be everyone's hero. It's not going to just fall on the heroes to try and help and save those people, but that it's also going to be the heteromorphs defending themselves, as well as the normal appearing people also helping and defending the heteromorphs. So yeah, that's kind of what I think Horikoshi is going with when it comes to this racism plotline, is that it's going to be somewhat resolved by people taking more initiative and trying to defend those who are being discriminated against and support them and show them that they are worthy of being human. They are worthy of their quirks, and that what they deemed as being ugly and atrocious can actually be beneficial. Very much how Shoji realized that even though he had a heteromorphic quirk, that there is still good that could come from it. And that the little girl did support him and felt sorry for him for what happened, which most likely led Shoji down the path that he is right now and could lead down the other heteromorphs down a similar path. So yeah, that's something that I really wanted to talk about a little bit more. All right, back to the original video. But yeah, I think that's pretty much all I really wanted to discuss. Yeah, I just really wanted to go a little bit more in depth on what's going to be happening in the next few chapters and when it comes to what Shirakumo Okuragiri is going to bring to Central Hospital, as well as just talk about the symbolism and what the gun could mean for the later chapters, and the implications of it being tone deaf may not necessarily be the case, and that we would have to wait and see where this development goes. But yeah, that's pretty much all I really have to say for this discussion. So what did you think? Did you still like the chapter after this discussion? And did you enjoy the changes that were made for Yamada in this chapter? Leave your thoughts down in the comments down below, leave a like on the video if you liked it, and don't forget to subscribe to my YouTube channel for more content like this. So, do all that cool jazz, and hopefully I'll be able to catch you in my next video. Goodbye!